All right, hi guys. Before we begin, I just want to remind you that at any point you can stop, rewind this video so that you can get all the information you need. We're going to be talking tonight about cellular respiration. Cellular respiration, if you remember, is the breakdown of complex organic molecules such as carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids into smaller molecules. We're going to focus mainly on the carbohydrates because it is the easiest one for your body or for living organisms to start with. Remember, we're going to take these simpler molecules that it's made into and produce ATP. We remember also that cellular respiration has two types. It's got anaerobic over on this side and aerobic on this side. And remember the biggest difference here is having oxygen or not having oxygen. What are the big difference between the two? Anaerobic cellular respiration does not use oxygen. It occurs in bacteria, yeast, fungi, and muscle cells, where aerobic cellular respiration uses oxygen and occurs in plants and animals. We look at anaerobic cellular respiration. First, we're going to look at lactic acid fermentation. And remember, there's two types of anaerobic respiration: lactic acid fermentation and alcoholic fermentation. Lactic acid fermentation happens in our bacteria and muscle cells, but only our muscle cells under extreme exercise. And it's not going to require any oxygen, and it occurs in the cytoplasm. There's two stages to our anaerobic respiration of lactic acid fermentation. Our first stage is glycolysis, where we have glucose being broken down into pyruvate. We're going to have two ATPs made. The second part of it is the fermentation part, and this is where we're going to take that pyruvate molecule and change it into lactic acid. As a result, no ATP molecules are made here. Anaerobic respiration, the second type, is alcoholic fermentation. This occurs in yeast and other fungi. It again doesn't use any oxygen, and it occurs in the cytoplasm. Alcoholic fermentation has two steps, just like lactic acid. It's going to start with glycolysis, where we take our glucose and we break it down into pyruvate. Again, two ATPs are made. We move on to our second stage. It's alcoholic fermentation. Again, it's going to take that pyruvate molecule that we made and change it into alcohol. And it's also going to produce carbon dioxide as a result. Again, no ATP is made. So a summary of anaerobic respiration: there's two types: lactic acid fermentation, alcoholic fermentation. The net result of each of these is you only produce two ATPs. They both occur in the cytoplasm, and basically it's going to take place in an organism that's very small and doesn't have high energy demands. They don't have a lot of cellular components. So something like our little yeast cell here. Aerobic respiration, on the other hand, or aerobic cellular respiration, is going to be using oxygen. It's going to be performed by plants and animals, and it's going to produce a significantly higher amount of ATP. If you remember, ATP is that very special molecule that's going to fuel everything we need in our cells. In particular, it's going to help us repair, replace old damaged cells. It's going to help us grow, which means we're going to increase our cell number, and overall maintain homeostasis. That means maybe build molecules that the cells might need to function. Aerobic respiration has a formula that's stated up here on your screen. It's going to start with glucose, which you remember is C6H12O6. Move on to adding oxygen, and you have 6 oxygen molecules. It's going to produce 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, 6 molecules of water, and ATP. That formula has to be committed to memory. You got to just know it backwards and forwards. You do have to know which ones are the reactants and which ones are the products. So if you look at the screen here, we have our reactants, or our ingredients is our 1 molecule of glucose and 6 molecules of oxygen. What is produced of rearranging these? Remember, we're going to get some carbon dioxide, water, and 38 ATPs. When we have aerobic respiration, remember the key difference between this and anaerobic respiration is the presence of oxygen is required. This is also going to happen in 2 stages. It's going to begin with the stage of glycolysis, which, just remember, is the breakdown of glucose and produces only 2 ATPs. And then it's going to move on to our mitochondria, where the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain is going to help us to produce our ATPs. Now remember, these are both very long, complex processes, but we're making them very simple here. They're run by enzymes, so you know that these reactions are going to be temperature and pH dependent and have a huge effect on the process of aerobic respiration. So let's look at glycolysis again, just to review. Remember, it happens in the cytoplasm. It's going to produce 2 ATPs. It's changing glucose into pyruvate. So it's no different here than anaerobic respiration. If we look at the second stage, we have the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain. This is going to be taking place in the mitochondria, that specialized organelle in eukaryotic cells. And remember, it has all those cristae, or those folds, that are going to allow for an extra large surface area and the concentration gradients to exist to have this process take place. It is going to utilize that oxygen, so it's going to need the oxygen in order to break down and create our 36 ATPs. As a result of producing our I think I said 38 before, I meant 36 ATPs, we are going to produce carbon dioxide and water. And that's, as you remember, those are waste products. We as humans breathe those out. So let's look at cellular respiration. With oxygen, we have anaerobic respiration. Without oxygen, we have aerobic respiration. Both of them are going to start in the cytoplasm with glycolysis. It's going to produce 2 ATPs. After that, if there's oxygen present, it's going to go on to the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain, where we're going to take place in the mitochondria, and it's going to produce 36 ATPs. If there's no oxygen present, it's going to go into, depending upon the organism, lactic acid fermentation or alcoholic fermentation. As you know, lactic acid is going to take place in our bacterial cells and muscle cells, and alcoholic fermentation generally takes place in yeast. It helps us create our beers and wines. In our aerobic respiration, you know, happens in animals and plants and some bacteria. So that's, in a nutshell, a very short summary of what we learned in class about cellular respiration. Please make sure you know all of the following: the purpose and the definition of cellular respiration. That means, why do we do it and what happens when we do it. You have to know that formula. C6H12O6 plus 6O2 makes 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O plus ATPs. You need to know the 2 types of cellular respiration: anaerobic and aerobic respiration. You need to know the products and the reactions for each. You need to know the stages that occur in each and where it takes place in each cell. You also have to know the organisms and be able to compare and contrast anaerobic and aerobic respiration like we did in class. Hope this was helpful. See you in class.